Hello and welcome. I am a seasonal reader, and so since it's winter where I live, I have been spending some time thinking about books to recommend to you that are perfect for the winter season. So grab something warm and sit down with me as I chat about this stack of books that I have curated specifically to be read during a cold, snowy winter season. The first two books that I have to recommend are mysteries, and they're actually mysteries that I've read recently. So the first one is Crossed Skis by Carnac. This is one of the pen names of E.C.R. Lorac, whose real name is Edith Caroline Rivet. She was a prolific mystery writer during the golden age of mysteries, and she was a member of the Detection Club. All around was a peer of Dorothy Sayers and Agatha Christie and many other famous female mystery writers. The reason why Crossed Skis is such a great winter option is it is an alpine mystery. So we have a group of young adults who are leaving the gray dullness of a winter in London, and they travel to the Austrian Alps for a ski trip. At the same time that this is happening, we also are introduced to a murder mystery where we have this fire that's in a boarding house and we have a body. And we've got an investigator who is just not convinced that it is just a straight, accidental fire in a boarding house, and even that the victim is just an accident. And so at the same time that we are following this group of young adults who are traveling to Switzerland and having that whole skiing experience, we're also following the trails by the inspector. I love train settings. So this is something that I am realizing that a few books that I've read the last few months where we've had train settings have really spoken to me. Just their experience of having like the compartments on the train and the meal and the like getting their packing together and their trunks. I just really enjoy that part. And then of course we have like snowstorms and blizzards and a lot of that comparison of city life in London and the freedom that you feel from getting out into the mountains to do skiing. I loved that part of it as well as the solving of the mystery. I will say, I was able to figure out who done it pretty quickly on just from some clues. I actually went back and kind of reread the beginning part and had my theory. There are some good red herrings and a little bit of like confusing things that happen where you think, well, how is this all connected? But eventually it all comes out in how it's connected, and just is a wonderful just sit by the fire while it's snowing outside or chilly outside and just imagine that you are in Austria. The next book that I have to recommend is Fear in the Cotswolds by Rebecca Tope. This is actually like number 7 in a series. So the thing that I appreciate about this particular book in the series is that even though it's far along in the series, you're really not missing much. Sometimes in these types of mysteries, you have relationships that develop, and through those relationships, you feel like, okay, things change. People get married, they, have children. There's all these things that happen. In this one, she's really alone. And I think that really feeds into the appropriateness for a winter read for this. So she decides to be a house sitter for somebody who wants to go to Greece. I can't remember where she goes, but she goes to like a warmer climate. And our main character, Thea, decides that she's going to be a house sitter in this like wintry place in England, in the Cotswolds, and allow this person to go. And she's going to run the farm for her. So she brings her dog with her. There's like a donkey there and rabbits. I think there's sheep. There's another dog that's there. And so she's really responsible for taking care of the animals and making sure that the house is like cared for, right? You're like watching for pipes freezing and just keeping the heat on and all of that. There is a lot of solitary time for our character. And so if that's something that you like for winter reads, this would be a good fit. There is a lot of descriptions about snowstorms and blizzards and her having to go out and care for the animals in the cold and in the snow. The mystery itself, I think, is pretty compelling because in the beginning, she finds a body. There's a whole big hullabaloo about getting the police to come because it's so far out in the middle of nowhere during a snowstorm. And by the time they all get there, the body's actually gone. And so it's really bizarre, right? Like in the beginning, especially, you're like, what is going on? But it's a pretty thick book without a ton of involvement with the mystery. So just be aware that it is very much about winter life on a farm. I found this signed copy in a used bookstore in Utah when I was out in the western United States. In this one, I did not actually figure out who had committed the murder. It was kind of like all tangled up. You had some ideas, but again, the murder wasn't like the big part of the story as much as in this one, but still a great winter choice. And again, very much about like solitary life. So 2 recommendations that I have for somebody who maybe likes family saga, kind of like a Rosamund Pilcher type book. I have 2. They have the same title. I have A Week in Winter by Maeve Binchy, and I have A Week in Winter by Marcia Willet. I'll start first with Maeve Binchy. This is uniquely written. I think it is the last published book or last written book by Maeve Binchy. Each chapter is a different character's point of view, which Rosamund Pilcher does, I believe, in Shell Seekers. Maeve Binchy is Irish, and so this is set on the western coast of Ireland, and we start out with Chickie Star. She ends up getting sort of tricked by a man who comes to visit in this area, and she falls in love with him, and she decides to travel back to the United States with him and start a life with him. And her parents are very disappointed in her because they are not married, and it's quite scandalous, and this is, sort of ruined the reputation that her family had in town. But she goes and moves with him to the United States, and of course, it lasts a very short amount of time before the man is tired of her and he's moved on, and she's stuck in the United States. And instead of just flying home and, sort of admitting that she had made a mistake, she stays in the United States, works very hard, and develops a relationship with a woman who kind of teaches her how to have a boarding house style job, hospitality, and writes back to her family a whole bunch of untruths about this man, and even goes to far as to say that they got married. She at some point feels like it's time for her to go back to Ireland, and she starts visiting every summer, and she's like just created these stories about her husband and, oh, he can't come because of X, Y, and Z. She then gets a proposal from there's one remaining sister of 3 sisters who owns this huge house on the coast, and the sister says, I want to leave this to you. I don't want other people in the town to buy it and other families to get it. I want it to leave to you, and I want you to run like a hotel, basically a tourist attraction with this property. She decides that she will do that, and so she moves back from the United States. She tells everyone that her husband died, and she works to open up this hotel. And this is all happening just in that first chapter about her. The next chapter is about someone who ends up working for her at the hotel. And then the next chapter is someone else who works for her. And then we move into the 1 week in winter where we have all of the different guests and we get their stories. It's a really kind of intriguing setup. There is one chapter in here with one character that I found to be really not necessary and kind of, to me, detracts from the coziness, which is this chapter, Miss Nell Howe. My personal opinion is you don't even really have to read it. It's really just unnecessary. I wish Maeve Binchy or her editor had just taken that chapter out. I think she could have done a couple things with the characters in other ways and not had that. So if you want to keep it really cozy and not kind of have this like Debbie Downer moment in it, and then just skip that chapter, move on. Honestly, it doesn't impact the plot. I loved The Week in Winter at the hotel, getting to know the guests, and it's a pretty fast read and a great choice for reading when it's like cold and unpleasant outside. And then the other one that I have that's a week in winter is Marcia Willet's. This reminded me so much of her Chadwick Family Chronicles and a little bit of Shell Seekers as well. So in this, we have Maudie Todhunter. She is a widow. She was the second wife of a wealthy lord, Hector. We're starting off the book with her deciding that she needs to sell some of the property that she inherited from Hector. And we understand that this is going to cause a problem with her stepdaughter, Selena, who has never forgiven her for marrying her father. Selena was like 12 or 13 when her mother had died and Hector had remarried Maudie. Maudie reminds me of the matriarch in the Chadwick Family Chronicles, just with her personality. She has a really sweet relationship with her granddaughter, Selena's daughter. And you just go from there. It is all tangled up in the family. There's all kinds of issues. You've got extramarital affairs. You've got bitterness. You've got deceit and financial issues and mystery as well. It is heavier than Maeve Binchy's Week in Winter. There are some heavier topics in here, but this just felt lighter. I think Marcia Willet always kind of has this like thread of sadness or bittersweetness in there, but it's like a soap opera in a book. It really is, with all that entails. And so it is a very engaging, compelling read where you're like, what else is going to happen? What else craziness is Marcia going to bring into the story? So it is also a fast read like Maeve Binchy's, I think, because you do want to read through it. But there's a lot about peat fires and keeping the house warm. And it isn't set so much in 1 week in a winter like Maeve Binchy's. There's a lot of looking back in the past in this one that really kind of makes it feel like this is outside of just 1 week. Whereas once you get set up in here with Chicky and the hotel, you're there for that week with those guests. But still a really great read for winter season if you want to have soap opera in a book. Next, I have 2 books that have not yet come out, but are coming out within the next month or so. They are both fantasy books. The first one is just so fantastic. It is Agnes Aubert's Mystical Cat Shelter by Heather Fawcett. Heather Fawcett wrote the Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries trilogy. She has written the Even the Darkest Stars and All the Wandering Light duology, which is also really great for winter, I think, as well as written some middle grade books that I really love. So Heather Fawcett is an author that I have so far enjoyed everything of hers that I read. If you love cats and fantasy that really, I think, toes the line between cozy fantasy but having pretty high stakes and a pretty complex magical system, then this would be a book for you to check out. The cat element of it is so fantastic. Agnes Aubert runs a cat charity where she brings the cats in from the city that are feral, takes care of them health-wise, and then works to try to get them adopted. Because of the magic system in the world, there was a magician's duel that destroyed the place that she's currently renting, where she literally only has 3 walls. She's also a widow, and so she's grieving a little bit. She does have her sister, Elise, in her life, and her sister is a great source of comfort and strength. But Agnes needs to find a place to move her charity. And she's really been struggling with finding a place that would host her organization, her charity, because people don't want to rent a space to somebody who just has like cages of cats. She comes across this shop that is for rent that everyone in the town is like, doesn't want anything to do with it. It's been open and available for rent for a while because there's rumors about illegal magical artifacts that are being dealt out of the shop. But Agnes doesn't really care as long as she can have a place, and so she gets it for a pretty cheap rent. And come to find out, all of the rumors actually are true, and it's actually worse off than Agnes even herself had known. But there's a lot in here about taking care of the cats. There's actually an enchanted oven that smells like baked goods. You get descriptions of this house, and all of that feels so cozy, as well as the magician's lair that we learn about. That feels really cozy. It's got the fire and there's all these enchantments. So a lot of coziness. But there's also dangerous. Rivenwood is like this dangerous other world that the magicians can access, and that seems very dark and spooky. There's also feuding going on among other magicians, and that feels really dangerous because it impacts humans. There's also political ramifications where politicians are talking about enacting laws that allow them to control magicians and to go in and kind of arrest anyone that they want. And so it feels a little bit like we're getting into like totalitarianism and dictators. And so there's that aspect to it. But the cats, like, your favorite characters. One of them is named His Majesty, or Binchy. She's named one of the cats Ambulance because it is like caterwauling. Just so many really cute names. She's got Thoreau. You just can kind of just picture these cats and see what a prominent place they play in the plot and in the story. The character arcs are really fantastic. The romance is very understated and an important part. Like, I feel like as a reader, we were falling in love as Agnes was falling in love again. There definitely was like this grumpy sunshine kind of trope, but again, very understated. And the romance is such a small part of this. It's very wholesome. There is zero spice, at all. It's just very wholesome. And I loved it so much. I think it's a book that, if you're interested in having something to read in the winter that also includes cats and magicians, Agnes Aubert's Mystical Cat Shelter is at the top of the list for me. And then the next one is The Sun and the Starmaker by Rachel Griffin. So in The Sun and the Starmaker, we have Aurora. She is living on the side of a village where they don't get a lot of sunshine, and it is very cold. So this book is perfect for winter reading, if no other reason than the cold setting. And we are aware at how cold it is. The greatest enemy to the survival of her family and to her crops is the frost. And it is like capital F, proper noun, frost. And it encroaches, and people can actually be inflicted with frost and end up having fatal injuries from it. And so they're very much reliant on the sun. And there is this old legend of a story of the sun falling in love with a human. As part of her promise to this human is that she would continue to find a way to get sun to this village and to this area that is on the other side of the mountain and is not easily accessible by sunlight. So as you can imagine, the world building in this is very unique and important. That is something that I love. So sometimes I think fantasy, because it has become such a popular genre, sometimes you can kind of see connections where you're like, oh, that's similar to this, similar to that. I feel like The Sun and the Starmaker is very unique in the world building and the magic that Rachel Griffin has set up. This also is a romance. As you can imagine, with the sun falling in love with the human, there is a romantic element. However, Aurora grows up with that legend and story in her life, but it's sort of like a story that's like at an arm's length, one that you hear about, but it's not like this constant reminder for them, except that they do need the sun. And there is someone who is the star maker, who is the one who every morning is responsible for making sure that the sunlight gets to the village. It turns out that Aurora's sister has been inflicted with frost, and so she's willing to do anything to try to save her sister. She loves her family very much. They love her. Through this process, we learn that Aurora has been chosen to be the next Star Maker. And this brings a whole new element into her life of longer lifespan than what is normally expected. It's not really immortality, but there is a longer lifespan for a Star Maker. And so she has been tasked with going and living in the palace with the current Star Maker so that they can have like a transfer of power, basically, where the current Star Maker will wane in his power and Aurora will increase in her power. This very much reminds me of a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I did some searching to see if there was any of that in the marketing materials or even if people in their reviews have said it, but I haven't really seen many people saying that it's Beauty and the Beast. Of course, it hasn't released yet. There's the element of a rose. There's also a mirror that's important. We have, Aurora, who would be the beauty, who's going to live in this castle with kind of like this grumpy, leave me alone kind of a guy. He's got his own part of the palace that nobody is supposed to go into, the castle. So felt like it really could be a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but again, so unique in the magic and the world building. There is, again, like I said, romance. And so there are 2 chapters, I think, if I recall, it's chapter 25 and chapter 29, where there is open door romance. It's not super explicit. It's not super graphic and detailed, but it is more open door than, a lot of fantasies that I would prefer. But it wasn't, again, really explicit. And so I just moved past that chapter. So if you're interested in a fantasy with a winter setting and you're okay with a tiny little bit of spice, then the Sun and the Starmaker, I think, is a unique option to choose. And then I've already mentioned this, but if while you're waiting for Agnes Aubert's Mystical Cat Shelter to be published, if you haven't yet read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries and you do enjoy fantasy or want to try a fantasy, this is a really great option. Do not be fooled by the spring plants on the cover. As you can see here, here is Emily and Pogue shoveling snow. It's very much a winter setting book. It's one of the things that I like about Heather Fawcett is all but one of the books of hers that I've read have been cold winter settings. This first book is exactly that. Emily actually ends up going, because she is writing an Encyclopedia of Fairies, she's trying to document, it's very academia of her, she's trying to document the Fae world, what she can find out about it. So she has to go to this very icy cold northern region to do some exploration of some stories that she has heard. And then her boss, basically supervisor, Wendell, ends up coming up there as well. There they are sitting by the fire. And Emily ends up getting into a very perilous situation. But the thing that I do love about Emily Wilde is she is neurodiverse and she is not a damsel in distress. She's very bright and witty and is an animal lover and, again, very academic. We've got footnotes in her journal entries, as this is all in journal entries. So this is also a really great fantasy option as well. And then we also have The Enchanted Greenhouse by Sarah Beth Durst. And again, while this cover looks a little bit green, you can see the snow and ice hanging off of it. And then on the back, there is more snow. So this is the second book in her Spell Shop world. I think a lot of people really loved the Spell Shop. This is the second book in that world. She has a third one coming out this summer as well. In this, we have mostly Turlu, who is the female main character, and Yarrow. They are, for all intents and purposes, isolated on this island of enchanted greenhouses. Yarrow and his family were responsible for caring for those greenhouses, but his family has since left. Turlu is actually the librarian who created the sentient spider plant, Kaz, who plays a big role in the Spell Shop. But other than knowing that, you could read this as a standalone. You just know at the beginning that Turlu has done something that was against the rules of magic in the society that she lives in, and she was punished very cruelly. But there is someone who decided that she deserved a second chance. That second chance meant that she was sent to this island of enchanted greenhouses. And the stakes in this are pretty low. It is a very cozy story. Yarrow bakes and he takes care of the greenhouses while Turlu does a little bit more of the academic part of this, of trying to unravel some of the mysteries that surround these enchanted greenhouses, because as she discovers, the magic around them is failing. And once the magic fails, they turn gray, and the coldness of the environment that they're in seeps in, and whatever plants are in these greenhouses can't survive. And so she really feels compelled to help Yarrow to try to figure out why the enchantments around these greenhouses are failing. So we have a second chance redemption for her. We have obviously some family issues. Yarrow's the only one left of his family there. The rest of them have all left. And so there's some resentment there. So it is very cozy and, again, slower. It doesn't have as high of stakes as, for instance, I thought Agnes Aubert's mystical cat shelter was going to be lower stakes, and I felt like it was like there were parts where I was like, oh my goodness, this is intense. You don't get the same feeling of intensity in this. If you are interested in Sarah Beth Durst's more intense books, just leave a comment below and I can give you some recommendations. But this is more of her like low-key, just cozy fantasy. And because of the setting and that low-key, you're in the cottage with the fire and the baking, and there's actually little tiny flying dragons and all of that kind of aspect to it, I think it is a really great winter read option. The last two books that I have to recommend is Frost on the Windows by Mary Stewart. This is actually her book of poetry. They're not all going to be like winter season, but she does have some winter poems in here. And since the title is Frost on the Window, I just think it's perfect for the winter season, where you would just read a poem a day, really sort of contemplate what it is that Mary Stewart was trying to express with that poem. But there are winter poems in here. You could also decide that you are just going to mark through and just read those and maybe read other ones at a different time of the year. But I thought this was just beautiful and so perfect for sitting by the window, hoping for snowflakes to fall, looking for, your own ice etchings on windows, and reading this. And then I could not let this opportunity go by without recommending Brambly Hedge and reading the winter story for Brambly Hedge. We actually have the complete version, which has different seasons and other stories. The illustrations just look like a Laurie Pemberton art piece or puzzle. And in the winter story, the mice decide that they need a snowball. And so they do all of this preparation to give them some entertainment in the bleakness of winter, where they create a space that is beautiful for a dance. Look at his little toes warming by the fire. They're all splayed out. It's just so cute. And then doesn't this just look like such a cozy place to be for winter if you are a mouse? So these are stories about mice families and what happens during different seasons of the year. And the winter story is just really sweet. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit shorter, that's just kind of a quicker read, then these two would be options. I would love to hear what books you would recommend for reading on a cold winter's day, so feel free to leave all of that in the comments below. I love to learn what your recommendations are. And let me know if you have read any of these and if any of them seem interesting to you that you might be checking out from the library. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time.